Hello Guildmasters! The 4th demo update for Guildrun is now live on Steam. Along with our normal bug fixes and quality of life improvements, this week's balance changes will focus on adding more excitement to our heroes and their specializations. We've made changes to 10 heroes this week, including a mini rework for Karsu. I won't go over every single change here, so be sure to read the patch notes in the description for the full list of changes. First, item slots over health bars will now be hidden when dragging other characters. We're also cleaning up more visuals and VFX. For example, the Resurrection VFX will no longer play twice. We're continuing to squash bugs, so thank you to everyone who's been reporting them to us. Ming's and Light Inspect will now scale properly when it ranks up. Sentinel's Plate will now correctly give 40 bonus defense instead of 60. Sorry, Sentinel's Plate users. And Nicholas can no longer start with quantity over quality in the Red Rift. He really just wants to eat the Rift Seal. Now, let's get into gameplay balance. There are two key balance topics to talk about before we go over specific changes. First, our lead designer Aleko has been diving into endless mode data and listening to the community. We're currently working on some solutions to a few key issues, including adjustments to how stun durations stack, but these solutions just weren't ready in time to make it into this week's patch. We're planning for targeted balance changes for Endless Mode to be one of the major focuses for next week's patch. Now, let's talk about Band-Aid solutions. A Band-Aid change can treat a symptom without touching the underlying issue. This raises the question, why would we ever go for a Band-Aid solution instead of trying to fix the underlying problem? The reality is that many of the changes we'd love to make for the demo, such as adjustments to how debuffs like Frost and Poison work, are simply too difficult for us to make in the Guildrun demo due to the amount of testing and iteration they require. Even if we were to only change the numbers on Frost and nothing else, it would impact so many different heroes, specializations, items, relics, enemies, and more that we would need to do a pass on all of these numbers for everything Frost related in the entire game, as well as extensive playtesting to make sure that all of the changes made the game more fun, more balanced, and didn't introduce any new bugs. Various changes to the way that debuffs work are definitely going to happen for the full release, but unfortunately, they won't happen in the demo due to these challenges. We hope that players can see changes like these as a signal that we're working on a proper cure for full release, and that we're working on plenty of content and balance outside of the demo for launch. It's worth emphasizing that just because something isn't fixable for the demo doesn't mean that it's not something you should talk about and give feedback on. All of the feedback we've received throughout the demo has been invaluable to us, and has not only helped us improve the demo, but has also helped us make the best full release that we possibly can. So thank you to everyone for the feedback, and please, keep it coming. With that said, here's our Band-Aid fix for this week, and this balance change will only apply to Red Rift. The Act 2 boss now resists Frost, reducing its effect by 50%. It will now take 4 Frost to reduce the boss's defense and attack speed by 1 instead of 2. Again, this only applies to the Red Rift Act 2 boss. This change aims to address the symptom of Frost, making the Act 2 boss too easy in Red Rift, and it doesn't address the underlying problem that Frost is stronger than the other 2 debuffs. Also, from now on, the Red Rift leaderboard will reset on a weekly basis with the release of each patch. Now, let's talk about event items. Ring items given from the second event were consistently outperformed by their counterparts, so we've added half a common item's worth of stats to most of them. Except for you, Greedy Ring, you know what you did. Power crystals have proven themselves to be a bit too potent and are being toned down slightly. We still expect them to be quite effective, but just a little less explosive on multi-class heroes in particular. We're also toning down the output of 2 shard generation related items from this event, which were taking over early games a bit too often. Now, let's talk about hero balance. Karsu is our second hero to get a mini rework. Karsu's base active ability, Snowpiercer, now fires an additional arrow for every 50 attack speed she has, up to 14 arrows in total. Arrows now apply 3 Frost, with 2 extra gained per rank up. This aims to raise her scaling potential and power level floor in non-boss fights significantly, while also lowering her power level against bosses just slightly. Like Yuna with her shurikens, Karsu now fires additional arrows as she gains more attack speed, so that she can dish out big damage to enemies in her range. The Frost applied per arrow now scales with her rank instead of attack speed, which means on average she'll be inflicting less frost per arrow and will require a little bit more investment than she did before to quickly overwhelm bosses with frost. The falling snow spec also required a mini rework due to her arrow change. It will no longer fire 5 additional arrows. Instead, it now reduces her max mana needed to cast her next ability per 1 auto attack Karsu lands, lowering mana cost to a minimum of 40. We hope players will enjoy experimenting with these Karsu changes. Kai is back for a 4th time in the patch notes, but this time he's seeing buffs to both his base stats and the damage on his active ability to help him catch up a bit with other warriors. His Intrepid spec was outperforming the others, so the rush duration has been nerfed slightly. For Logan, the Iron was statistically the worst spec in Red Rift. If an extra item slot worked for Nicholas, why wouldn't it work for the Iron? So this spec now gives an extra item slot when taking it. Grace continues to carry runs from the bench, while not having quite enough incentive to be played on board. Her base shielding duration on her active ability Salvation has been increased, and her Benevolent spec has had its stall time reduced. Her selfless backup shields have been lowered a bit. These changes are aimed at making her a more appealing onboard option, while making the selfless a bit less of an insta pick. We're very happy with last week's changes to Nicholas, which gave him an extra item slot at baseline and made him much more fun and easy to use, especially in Red Rift. It also made him a wee bit OP. His passive no longer gains 100% of the stats of the consumed item, but now gains 50% base and 25% per rank of the consumed item stats, which can total up to 125% at S rank. This change targets his early game stats snowballing, while also giving him some rank-based scaling. Now, he should snowball a bit less hard in the early game, while also gaining the extra potential to become a late game demon thanks to the additional stat scaling at S rank. For Rowan, the Tectonic, his active spec, is outperforming his other specs in all 4 pre-endless timings, a clear signal for a slight nerf. Ming is getting a minor follow-up buff to last week's buff to improve his scaling slightly. A bug fix to the Enlightened should also provide Ming with a bit of a boost this week. Gustav had a few changes previously, but currently has a weak Act 1. We're giving his Blizzard more base damage and more base frost per tick. Both of these changes are meant to improve his Act 1 performance without heavily impacting his Act 2 performance. Fiona's Lustrous spec no longer inflicts burn per 20 shield removed. It now inflicts burn whenever a hero with shield is damaged, and it should inflict far more burn in the average fight than it did previously. It'll be a bit less effective in deep endless runs where the damage numbers get really high, but this should ultimately land as far more of a buff than a nerf. Scorn is getting a bit of a band-aid buff to his base stats and passive ability. These changes should help Scorn in Act 1, where he currently struggles just a bit. If you haven't checked it out already, be sure to join our Discord where you can take on weekly challenges with the community. This week's challenge is the It's Over 9,000 challenge, where you'll need to find a way to boost the stat of any hero to over 9,000. We're not even sure how to do this exactly, so we really want to see what builds players cook up to achieve this. We'll see you next week with another Guildrun update.